Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We're just going to give it a few more minutes, just a couple of more minutes, just to give some time for more people to join us, either here on Zoom or on our social media, Facebook Live or YouTube. So we'll just let it, just give them a few more minutes and then we'll be able to start. Okay, if you've just joined us, welcome. We're just about to start, just giving one more minute for more people to join us, and we'll get started very, very soon. Thank you very much for joining us. And we do look forward to engaging conversations with everybody. Okay, so it's about 3:02, so we're going to keep time and get started. Thank you very much for joining us. And again, thanks to our guest speakers for being here as our guests and engaging in such an important conversation that we've been having. This is our 5th webinar. We've been having this series of webinars here at Kca for the last 4 months. And all those webinars, in case you've missed them, are on our website and on YouTube. So feel free to go back and have a look at them. They were very engaging, very healthy conversations going on, serious and healthy. So it's really important that, you know, somebody's saying that there's no sound. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, yes. Awesome. Good, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, so if you missed those conversations, please feel free to go back and take a look at them. However, we're here on our last series of webinars and just an equally important conversation that we're having. So welcome again and thank you for joining us. If you are on Facebook, feel free to type in your questions. We will be able to, we're following and monitoring those, and we'd like to make sure that all questions are answered as well. And if you have joined us in the Zoom, you could use the question and answer tab, and we'll be happy to answer those questions, make sure that everybody's questions are answered. We hope this would be as interactive as possible, so don't shy away from asking any questions because that's the only way we're going to be learning and absorbing all the information that is being shared by our esteemed guests here. All right, so I'd like to take the first opportunity to invite our President and Executive Director, Ephraim Maura, to have a few words and introduce himself and our agenda today. Ephraim?
Thank you very much, Fatma. Before I start, I just want to say thank you very much for the viewers and attendees who are taking part in this very important conversation, and more so the panelists who have taken up this one. This is a very special part of the webinar series, and I just want to recognize Mr. Edward Wageni, who is a global head for HeForShe, who's joined us today, and the other panelists who are going to join us as we move along. Why UN Women HeForShe program is very important for us is because we are trying to rally men to come forward and join the conversation on gender equality. So this is very, very important for us. If you watch the other 4 webinars we've had before, we had 4 of them on this series. This is the last one. And there's a very good reason why we kept this one up to the last minute. And we really want to appreciate our panelists today, who are entirely men, who have said, yes, today we're going to add our voice on this issue of gender equality. So welcome and thank you very much. So I'm going to share my screen. And before I go ahead, I just want us to do the land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge this unceded land on which Kca operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Hurowendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this place is still the home of many indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Again, briefly to touch on the panelists who are with us today. On this very important day, we are discussing gender equality and UN Women's HeForShe. Besides Edward Wageni, who is the global head HeForShe, UN Women, we're also going to be joined by Mayor Patrick Brown, the City of Brampton mayor. And he's very supportive on the issues of gender equality. And he's going to talk to us about it and the overall issue of why men need to rally as advocates of change for the achievement of gender equality and end to gender-based violence. Again, today, we are very happy to be joined by Brian Anderson, who is the Executive Director of Fathering Together. And also Jake Sticker, Executive Director, Let's Change Men, is going to also speak to that issue of gender equality. So I would also like to recognize the Canadian Women's Foundation and Government of Canada for being the donors and sponsors of this particular event. Without them, we would not be able to have held all of the 5 webinars we've had over the last 4 months. We just want to recognize them and say that we're very thankful. And today is a very special day. We want to bring together the various stakeholders, have a conversation, and see how Canada, as a country, we can rally forward all the stakeholders, from the government to corporate sector to educational institutions, how they can come together to work on the issue of HeForShe. And we have a unified solidarity movement in a way that we'll be able to address this. Because if we leave this issue of gender equality only to the women, they will not be able to achieve the ultimate goal. It's very important for men and boys to come forward. I'll start introducing you to the Kca mandate and what Kca usually does. And the first thing is probably to know more about the board of directors. Myself as a president and executive director, an ex officio board member as a chief accounting officer. We also have the board secretary, who is also director of newcomers and settlement, is Catherine Matimu. Rafael Fernandez, a former Olympian, Kenyan Olympian, is our board chair and director for sports and recreation. And we have Fatma Nadir, who is also the host of this particular webinar, is our director for socioeconomic empowerment. Esther Makori is a director for careers, education, and research. We also have Sanjit Kaur, who is actually the director for women and gender affairs. So this particular project under which we are holding this webinar series is directly under the program managed by Sanjit Kaur, who is based in Ottawa. We also have Farhan Kevo, who is the director of communications, and he wears many caps. He's also the GTA West Regional Chair. And Terry Otleb, who is here with us also, is a director, seniors outreach. Kca has 3 levels of management. So we are quite elaborate in how we work across the country. We have 18 regions across the country. And some of the council, regional chairs in the council include Calvin Gatoto, who is a GTA Central Regional Chair. We have Farhan Kever again, who is a GTA West Regional Chair. Swale Abdallah is a GTA East Regional Chair. We have Maureen Ruto, who is a Regional Chair for Northern Ontario. We have Samuel Kiragu, who is a Nova Scotia Regional Chair. We have Dennis Adundo, who is a Newfoundland and Labrador Regional Chair. Naomi Gichungu, Manitoba Regional Chair. And Donna Oditio, who is a Regional Chair for New Brunswick. We're still expanding our tentacles. And very soon, we expect our numbers in terms of representation on the ground grow. So over the last 2 years since Kca was incorporated, we've seen gradual growth, and it has been measured and calculated. We are growing organically just to make sure that we're able to offer our services across the country. The team that has been very, very instrumental in putting together these webinars, all the way from the first one to this last one, is our administration team under the Kca Secretariat. I just want to recognize all the efforts, and some of the people who are here include Jennifer Reed and Lawrence and Danish. They've done an amazing job to ensure that our Secretariat has done a good job in terms of implementing the webinars. So Miriam McKenzie has been our Gender Equality Officer all along throughout the project. Jennifer Reed is our Communications Officer. We have Abdul Basit Bonsu, who is our Finance Officer at the Secretariat. We have Bisma Habib, who is our Administrative Assistant. Lawrence Oliver is our User Support Technician, is with us here today. Danish Rehman, our Social Media Manager. Jessica Wu, our Accounting Assistant. Genesis Bowen, our Social Service Worker. I'll also talk a bit about KCA. KCA is a federal not-for-profit organization, and we seek to address the issues affecting Canadians, especially those of Kenyan origin, the Black communities and racialized individuals. We also focus on implementing programs and offering services to newcomers, low-income families, and socially excluded groups residing in Canada to improve their personal well-being and socioeconomic status. We serve various groups, and some of those groups include the immigrants, refugees, and migrants. We have women and girls, which is very core to what we are doing. So KCA is basically a feminist organization. So we're doing a lot of work, and because most of our programs actually touch on women, we realized more than 90% of our beneficiaries on most programs are women. And ranges from the food aid distribution to counseling, mental health. So we're working with a lot of women and girls. So they're very core to what we are doing. So we're also serving seniors. We have technologically challenged. We have a program that addresses that. People with mental health challenges, children and youth, people of low socioeconomic status, unemployed people, Black community, especially the continental Africans. These are some of the programs we offer. We have 88 programs, and currently Women and Gender Affairs is one of the most active programs we have, followed by Newcomers and Settlement. We have Socioeconomic Empowerment. Fatma is here, she's the director for that particular program. Sports and Recreation, we have our board chair here, Mr. Rafael Fernandez, the Olympian. He's also here, and that's one of the most active programs. We've been affected very much by COVID, but from next year, the fact that restrictions have been lifted is going to be really active from next year. Then we have Health and Wellness. We have Children and Youth, Careers, Education and Research, and at last, we have the Program for Seniors Outreach. As I mentioned, this is the culmination of the webinars that we've done over since August. The first webinar we had was on August 21st, and it was about understanding and preventing gender-based violence. The second webinar we had is September 11th. On September 11th was crisis intervention and support for survivors and their families. On September 25th, we had a webinar for gender-based violence, and that's on navigating the legal and justice system. October 16th, that was just about 3 weeks ago, we held the media's role in ending gender-based violence, and it was a very, very interactive session with the media fraternity. Today, it's a very special day, as I mentioned, and we're engaging our panelists today, and we are all having a conversation regarding the gender equality at United Nations Women HeForShe. I'm not going to speak to that issue of HeForShe. We have the global head himself who's going to talk to us about it. The Women and Gender Affairs is a program that has various initiatives, and some of them include the Women Settlement Support. We have Girl Child Empowerment Program, which was very active in our last financial year. We were able to raise up to $2,000, and we sponsored a girl to do some studies here in Canada. So it's a new program and an initiative that is working very well, and we're going to enhance it in the current financial year. Then we have women economic security. As I said, 90% of our beneficiaries are mainly women. So we have all the statistics to back up this initiative. And we are working very closely with Canadian Women Foundation and other key donors to ensure that we address some of the issues we have in this particular group. Then UN Women HeForShe is we are very passionate as KCA, and that's why we took it up, just to see whether we can have a conversation that we can see how in Canada we can have this initiative move forward. And we are very lucky today to have the Mr. Edward Wageni, the global head for HeForShe, and we're gonna start this conversation. So this is not gonna be a hello and goodbye. We expect that from today on, we are going to have a more concerted effort on how we can bring all the stakeholders together so that this initiative can move forward. The last initiative we have is gender-based violence. And this is part of what we've been discussing over this period. So what is gender equality? So gender equality is a fundamental human right, and no discrimination towards anyone based on gender or what they identify as, ensuring equal rights and opportunities, gender for all, allowing women to feel and be comfortable in their own skin and in their own gender, allowing everyone to thrive, accomplish, and reach success without any gender-based barriers or judgments, providing a peaceful, sustainable, and workable world for all society. So as I mentioned again, KCA's commitment is on building the HeForShe campaign. And our commitment includes implementing strategies to engage men and boys as allies, applying cultural sensitivity measures in the design and delivery of our programs, empowering women and girls to achieve self-sufficiency, engaging communities as active participants in pursuing gender equality. So empowering women and girls. So how do we do it? So as I said before, we have various initiatives. The first one is Girl Child Empowerment. And this year we have a target of setting a $75,000 bursary kitty to support up to 5 girls from vulnerable families in Canada to access post-secondary education. We've seen that is possible. In our first year, we were able to raise up to $2,000, which was an amazing feat. The other thing we have is women economic security, and this is uplifting women and families out of poverty and into financial independence. And we're collaborating with the Socio-Economic Empowerment Program. Fatma is here because most of the women actually we've shown in entrepreneurship are women. So we have a Biashara Networking Club, and soon we are launching a Pamoja Bereavement Fund to address this security issue. So you'll find that increasing women control over financial and physical assets also improves the family's health and nutrition, and that's according to United Nations Women. And over 90% of the direct food aid beneficiaries are women who have been highly impacted due to the financial impacts of COVID-19. So out of the call for proposals we've done, we always collect those statistics, and we've analyzed over the last 1 year, out of all the beneficiaries, 90% are women. And that shows that women have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. So we take that issue very seriously. So our direct food aid program focuses on food security and nutrition support those families by improving household well-being. It also contributes to safety, dignity, and integrity of the vulnerable people. So this is KCA's commitment, as I mentioned, to engaging men and boys as allies. And our goal is to draw attention to the power imbalance and to encourage men to take critical look at their privileges and power relationship. We're also encouraging men to look at gender equality in an intersectional way to raise awareness of the different structural forms of discrimination. So how do we mobilize men and boys for gender equality? So we're trying to devise various activities, and some of those we're still gonna see how we work with the HeForShe program under the UN Women. And one of those is to facilitate initiatives geared towards educating men that equality between all genders requires their sustained commitment, and then involve men in planning programs and in identifying areas of focus. And we're very happy that the leadership of KCA I know we have men who really support and are very passionate about this area of focus. And we are trying to integrate the HeForShe in most of these programs. As you saw, most of our beneficiaries are women. What are some of the expected outcomes? Many in our communities will become aware of the injustice between the sexes and counteract this injustice through their daily actions. Men will understand that violence against women is still a social problem and that men should fight gender-based violence in all its forms. So inclusion of men and boys as change agents and champions in the process of gender equality. So thank you very much. That's my presentation. I won't take much time. I know we are waiting to listen to our panelists. So back to you, Fatma. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ephraim, for that. And that was a wonderful introduction and presentation. And I can tell you that all the directors and volunteers at Kca are all behind Kca's commitment to gender equality and all the initiatives that we'll be taking. We will be working together to implement all of those initiatives just to make sure that we do get the desired outcome of equality for all. So we are together in all this, and I'm sure we will be successful. So shifting gears now, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. And give me 1 second. Our next speaker is Mr. Edward Wageni, as you have been introduced by Ephraim. Edward is the global head of HeForShe UN Women. He is also from Kenya and a gender equality expert with experience in strategic leadership, operational management, and coordination. He has worked with non-profit organization in Kenya, where he led initiatives for the social and economic empowerment of women and girls. He works with civil society and led partnerships with government, UN agencies, private sector in promoting gender equality globally. He's also worked on the development and facilitation of training on gender justice and sexual and reproductive health and rights with governments and civil society. Today, Mr. Wageni will discuss global efforts led by the United Nations to raise awareness of gender equality among men and create allies to facilitate the empowerment of women. So once again, thank you so much, Mr. Wageni, and welcome.
Right. Yeah, so thank you very much, Fatma. Good afternoon, everyone. And it's a great pleasure for me to be here with you today. And a big thank you to Ephraim and all staff at Kca who made it possible for us to gather here. Thanking everyone for making time to be here to discuss and share experiences of what we are all working towards to impact and the impact that we're having to advance gender equality. So as you have just been informed, my name is Edward Wageni and I work for UN Women, which is the United Nations entity charged with championing for women's and girls and accelerating progress on meeting their needs worldwide. So more specifically, I work for HeForShe, which Ephraim has made reference to many times. And I'll not assume that everybody knows about HeForShe. So I'll spend just a few minutes providing a bit of a background on HeForShe, where it's coming from and where it's heading. So HeForShe was established in the year 2014, but officially launched in 2015 by Emma Watson. And sometimes people ask, why the year 2014, 2015? And the simple answer is there's nothing very specific about the year 2014 or 2015. It was just a point of recognizing that as UN Women, the UN entity for charged with promoting empowerment of women and girls, kind of implied that gender equality is about women and girls, but then also recognizing that women and girls, or people who identify as women and girls, only constitute 50% of the world population. So there's no way that 50% of the world population can solve the critical gender equality issues, because gender equality is about men and women, boys and girls. And also then recognizing that we are so far behind in terms of achieving gender equality. Just before COVID happened, we were talking about 257 years before we are able to achieve gender equality. There are some other areas that much progress that has been made, for example, in the area of education, where the gap has shrunk. But then also looking at the, at a global level, about 90% of heads of state in the world are men. If you look, for example, at the Fortune 500 companies, CEOs, they are men. If you look at community levels, you find that men hold positions of power and influence. So really, if we are to achieve gender equality, then it's important to have men on board and boys as well, because men, societies socialize men and girls to act in certain ways in their lives. It's important to bring them on board because they have a lot of power in terms of the political power. They have economic power in terms of the resources that they command in terms of the organizations and communities that they lead. So that was the clear realization that we needed to bring men on board. An important thing to factor in today is that the International Men's Day theme for 2021, which will be celebrated on the 19th of November, the theme is about improving gender relations between men and women. And that resonates well with HeForShe, as well as the discussion that we're going to be having this afternoon. So just to reiterate some of the, why HeForShe was founded, recognizing that we are far from achieving gender equality, that gender equality is not just about women and girls, and that we need to move from, building awareness to looking at action and looking at what men and boys can do, and they define what matters to them and what they can do to make a difference. And I'm very pleased to see that that Kca has taken up the call and is spearheading this, and by convening us to discuss the difference that we can make. So from the time that we were founded, we have been working with heads of state, heads of private sector, academic institutions, intergovernmental bodies, and civil society. So we have just recently launched the new HeForShe Alliance, building on the 5 years of work that we had been working on. If you look at some of the heads of state that we've worked with, the Prime Minister of Canada was one of them, the President of Iceland, the President of Ghana, the President of Rwanda, a big number of heads of state, as well as global corporate private sector bodies such as Unilever, Vodafone, and BNP Paribas, and many others, as well as many universities, some of which are in Canada. And so that is, that is where we're coming from. But also then we recognize that we have mutual kind of allies, for example, looking at how the work that we are doing and what you're doing, and the government of Canada, recognizing that what we're doing is very much in the alignment with Canada's feminist international assistance policy, which recognizes that the empowerment of girls is important in the foreign policy. That commits to supporting efforts to reduce sexual and gender-based violence, to strengthen women's organizations and movements such as Kca, and to improve the government's capacity to provide services to women. The policy also then believes that gender equality can be advanced throughout the work, and that the feminist approach does not limit focus on women and girls. And so even within the government of Canada, the engagement of men and boys is central to that, as it recognizes that gender equality cannot be achieved by women and girls in isolation. So reiterating the points that I just made earlier, and that also men and boys must also challenge the traditions and customs that support and maintain gender inequalities, because social norms, gender stereotypes also limit boys in their society and family roles. So basically what this is also saying is that for as long as women are not able to exercise their rights, that also means that men and boys are not also able to enjoy their life to the fullest. So it's important to ensure that men and boys are engaged in the fight for gender equality and be given the opportunity to advocate for equality, very much in line with what Kca is doing. So in terms of some of the work that Kca is a very good example of what the vision of what the organization was founded for. But I would also like to give you just 2 or 3 examples of some of the other work that has happened in other countries that is really making a difference. So, for example, the HeForShe message has resonated in other parts of the world, and I'll give an example of from South Africa. In South Africa, where people meet and have a drink, they call it the taverns or a pub. And in Johannesburg, a group of men came across HeForShe and took up the message and began to discuss issues around them and identified gender-based violence as one of the issues. So they agreed that every Wednesday they would be meeting in a tavern to discuss what they can do. Over time, many taverns joined that call and started organizing meetings. But what also then happened with that is that the leader of the group, the spouse, noticed that every Wednesday they were having a meeting and wanted to know what exactly happens every Wednesday that you have these meetings with other men. And so the spouse, the husband, told the woman that the wife that we have been having these meetings whereby we identify that gender-based violence is a critical issue and we need to do something about it. And the woman asked, can we join the conversation? And the man said that, yeah, I'll go and check with the other colleagues and we'll let you know. And what came out of that is that men started coming together, started looking at the issue of gender-based violence. But in addition to that, knowing that South Africa, up to this day, that HIV and AIDS is still a problem, they made a condition that for you to be participating, for anybody to be participating in this conversation, we need you to be tested for HIV every 3 months. So what has grown out of that is that it has spread in many other taverns across South Africa. But in addition to that, it has led to interventions on sexual and reproductive health and rights. And that is being replicated in other countries, being scaled up in other countries, more specifically in Malawi and Zimbabwe. Another example is, I talked about university clubs that we work with. And this has been taken up, and across the world, we have been working with more than 250 universities. And this is very much led by students looking at issues that are important within universities. So, for example, it's very well known that in universities, issues of sexual harassment do happen. And we have these more than 250 clubs across the world where students have taken up the issues and addressing them within themselves, but within the leadership of the universities. And for them to have done that, they have we made available action kits that enable them to look at what one can do at an individual level and what they can do at the university level. So over time, we have also then, as UN Women, tried to understand all the work that has been happening on engaging men and boys. And very recently, we carried out a global study, because as we move into the new alliance, we also want to make sure that our work is very much informed by evidence. And what we have done is the study that has informed us on what has been working, what has not been working, what needs to be done. And we are now framing our language in terms of transforming patriarchal masculinities. And this basically what that is about understanding the ideas and practices about masculinity. And this is basically what is it to be a man, that then emphasizes the superiority and authority and power of men over women. And then looking at ideas and practices that serve to maintain the gender inequalities and the power more broadly. So we are looking at how these are expressed at the individual level. So that is in attitudes and behavior, how that then is reflected in institutions in terms of policies and practices, and ideologically, in terms of social norms. As we launch as we move into the new alliance, we have also, come up with a new campaign, and we are calling it, I Do campaign. So that is about moving from awareness to action. And this is about a commitment to equality, a commitment to action. And, you know, when you say I do, I would imagine that conjures, you know, issues of commitment, because people think about the vows that people take and they say that I do. And this is very much around that as well. So this is about giving men the support and making it easier for them to act, and outlining some tangible actions and steps that they can take to address gender discrimination and stand beside women around them and around the world, and help themselves too. So this is the campaign that we have launched, is around 4 areas. You know, it's about the family, so including acts of support to partners and involved parenting, for example, you know, and potentially extending to other relationships. So looking at friends, you know, with male peers, and in particular calling out sexist and violent language and having those difficult conversations, because it's actually quite hard when, you know, something is happening, you know, amongst friends. It's normally quite difficult, challenging to call out something that is not right. But this is what we are actually asking men to take a call on. And this also, it's also about colleagues supporting equal opportunities in the workplace, and with a particular focus, for example, on equal pay. And then to oneself, you know, looking at and encouraging men to look at their own attitudes, actions and attitudes that challenge the male stereotypes, with particular focus on men's health. And to support this, we have a manifesto, and I would like to read the manifesto to you. You know, so please listen carefully. So this manifesto is about: do you take women as equal, as your complete equal? Do you want a world where we are freed from stereotypes from the past? Do you want a world with equality in our lifetime, not a century of two? Do you listen to her views, give credit where it's due? Do you interrupt the interrupter and call out the cat caller? Do you back her career dreams like she backed yours? Do you collaborate with women, create what endures? And do you reduce the pay gap, raise families that are entrapped? Do you consider all for the role, because diversity is whole? And do you share the care, share the chores, and share the cause with everyone who will listen? And even those who won't, do care for yourself so that you can show up for others. Listen, so many men want. Listen like so many men want. Do you teach your daughters their worth and remove the limitations? Do you talk to your sons about consent, set the right foundation? And do you reject a world divided, a world of me versus you? And do you see equality not as a war and a fight, but as a union to renew? And an act of love for the ones that we love, for all. Do you promise to stand up for it in love, in friendship, in the workplace, in life, and in law? So to commit today and every day for as long as you live. And for those who are listening today, to everyone who identifies as a man in the forum today, I want us to go through this as well, and I'll be done shortly. So this is: do you see gender equality not as war and a fight, but as a union? I don't know what you've just said in your head, but the reality is that 1 in 3 women worldwide will experience violence in their lifetime, and 1 in 5 women will experience rape or attempted rape. So this is the war that we as men must end. The majority of men are ready to do their part to end male violence. Are you? Equality benefits everyone. What will you commit to? So I'm reading this deliberately so that you can be registering this and identify what you need to commit to. Do you interrupt the interrupter, call out the cat caller? An international study of 16,000 women found that 84% of women were harassed before they were even adults. And some of the women or people who identify as women in this forum might identify with that no person should ever have to walk in fear, talk in fear, or live in fear. A safer and a happy society for all starts with respect. A simple task, let's do it. Equality benefits everyone. What will you commit to? So visit HeForShe for inspiration and post your I do on social with #HeForShe. Thank you very much.
Wow, that's amazing. I loved listening to all the manifesto, and it's just so inspiring. And one thing that really came to my mind, Mr. Wageni, is when fighting gender equality and the rights for women and everything, there is I'm sure you find that there is culture that you have to deal with as well. And culture is the fabric of every society. So certain things are engraved in people. What are the challenges that you find that you have to overcome? Because that's really something that has to come from inward to be able to see the results outside.
I think how I understand what you're talking about is the social norms that have been set in society. And the challenge is that even within as an individual, when you're going against the grain, you have to be really courageous to be able to see it and commit to what you have committed. So the challenge that we find is that people having that challenge, and even from the very first time when HeForShe was founded, was the recognition that sometimes people don't know what to do. They feel that they want to do something, but they actually don't know what to do. Like you can bombard people with a lot of talk, but at the end of the day, they'll ask you, okay, so what can I do? And and that was the basis of what led us to develop action kits that enable and guide people to do what they can do as an individual. So if you visit our website, we have action kits for individuals on what you can do as an individual. We have action kits for community, what you can do at the community level. We have action kits for universities, students. We have action kits for companies, and we have tools like the Barbershop Toolkit that enables conversations to happen, guides how you can conduct trainings within a workspace, how you engage with the leadership, how you engage with co-workers. And the title actually, which is interesting, the Barbershop Toolkit, is also the recognition that most men, because of the socialization and the norms, they don't talk about issues that are affecting them. But most men, including myself, when you go to the barbershop, we find that we connect with the barber and we're able to talk about things. So one of the things that was done about these two was socializing it with the barbers so that they can actually encourage men to have these conversations in a vulnerable way, but in a way that they are able to share. So that is, I think that is the main challenge. The other challenges that we have found is that sometimes, given that there's many organizations that I've talked about how far we are. There's not enough investment on gender equality and actually investing in areas for women and girls empowerment. And sometimes people think that organizations that bring men together are taking away resources, the scarce resources that should actually be going to supporting the empowerment of women and girls. And with that recognition, what we have done with HeForShe is, bringing partnerships whereby we are a self-financing initiative, whereby we are not taking away resources from the traditional sources of funds to do our work. It's about the men who have come together as HeForShe champions, also committing to invest in the initiative so that we're able to act, because they hold the power, they hold the resources. So those are, the challenges, the two quick challenges that I can identify.
Wow, that's impressive. What I'm hearing you saying is that really the men who are very active are taking it upon themselves to make the change.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. So we have more. We need to have more men encouraged as well, so that there is going to be an impactful gain and change in society. That's wonderful. So I have quite a few questions for you. One of the questions is, what resources are available from United Nations HeForShe to Canadian organizations to address gender equality issues that have arisen during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Okay, one of the things that we did is then recognizing that COVID had a huge impact on gender inequality issues. One of the quite, I would presume, obvious one was the escalation of an increase in gender-based violence, given people who are living and have been living in confinement. But the other thing that also has also happened within COVID, because of COVID, is actually the impact that it has had on social norms with the job losses, where you find that men are not able to provide as they would have, because it has actually impacted on their jobs. Was to begin to look at. It doesn't mean that it has just been that bad, but out of that, the high impact and the speed at which this was impacting on norms, looking at what are the promising practices that have happened, that were happening across the world. And because of that, we convened a global webinar to learn from different parts, partners from across the world on what has been happening, what are some of the good practices that can be shared. And we have that report from the global webinar that brought together the private sector, civil society organization, government, on some of the good things that have come out from the COVID, during COVID, that can be shared with others. So we have that resource available. I would be happy to share the report with you so that you can share with others. But I've also talked about some of the other resources that we have on our website that would be useful, to start conversations even during COVID, as we tail off from hopefully from COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome, thank you, wonderful. I have another question here, and the question is, in what ways can HeForShe work with KCA to bring stakeholders together, including colleges, corporate government agencies, and non-for-profit organizations?
That's a really good question, because it's very much in line with what we see ourselves doing in the next 5 years. For those who know HeForShe well, from 2015 to around 2020, 2021, there was this unitary voice from New York, and the key learning from that is that we need to really do more in terms of having hubs, whereby organizations can come together, identify what they can do in their different regions, given that in as much as gender inequality issues are fundamentally kind of the same, they are nuanced in terms of where issues are happening. So for example, gender equality issues in Papua New Guinea are so different from what it is in South Africa or what it is in the UK or Canada. And we need people in those locations to be doing what they, identifying what the issues are and identifying, solutions at that level. So the question is now, for example, how can we improve our working relationship, our collaboration with the KCA? And it's actually just about that. We have a network of many organizations. We have many partners at different levels. We have even benefiting from the footprint of UN Women in many countries. We've got resources to share, ideas to share, and I think that would be the best starting point, learning from what we have been implementing, learning, so that KCA does not also have to fall into some of the pitfalls that we may have fallen in the past. So that calls for a closer collaboration and seeing what can we do together in Canada in partnership with other of the other partners that we've had, including universities. And is there any way that we can facilitate and look at having engagement with, for example, with our mutual partner, for the government of Canada, on how KCA can be supported further to be able to broaden its work. From the initial conversation by Ephraim, he was talking about how you're interested in growing further and reaching other parts of Canada. How can we work together to enable that to happen? Is there a possibility of some of our partners to connect with you in some of the areas where they are working, and for you to collaborate and to push the agenda? Yeah.
Thank you for that. I actually have a question regarding Canada, and the question is, Canada is still lagging behind on the uptake of HeForShe. What is your office doing to address this?
Actually, that question is about not just what we are doing as HeForShe, it's what we are doing, including with other partners. So for example, the Prime Minister was a champion in the first phase. And what we are doing is very practical. Today is a Saturday, but I'm here talking to you, hoping that I'm connecting with what I'm saying and that you're taking up the message to grow the message. I've just shared about the I Do campaign. So what are you gonna do with the campaign that I've just shared? It grows from within. We can inspire, but actually action needs to come from within. But we can also connect with other partners who are in Canada to see what can be done. So we'll be happy to grow it in Canada as much as possible.
Wonderful. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, throw it right back at us, and we are in this together. We do have a commitment here in Kca, and we stand by it. So we really do look forward to working together. I'm loving the questions, very interactive. I do have another question. What is 10 by 10 by 10? And is it still active as a HeForShe program intervention?
Okay, what 10 by 10 by 10 stands for was the impact initiative that was established in 2015 that ran up to 2020. And that was about, it was just about coming up with a catchy way of having a campaign that people get and want to run with it. So it was about getting 10 heads of state, 10 heads of global CEOs, and 10 academic institutions. So that is 10 by 10 by 10. And what that was about was the leaders, the heads of state, the CEOs of the global corporates, and the presidents of universities, making commitments that they would be held to account. And what I mean by that is that, they had to make a commitment on something that was transformative. They had to be held account that they would have to come to New York during the General Assembly to report on the progress, and that they would also nominate somebody at a senior level, C-suite level, within that would be working with us on a regular basis. So it was about making sure that on a monthly basis we are having calls with, for example, heads of diversity and inclusion, and sharing lessons. So that is what was implemented from 2015 to 2020. And we are now building on that in the new alliance. So we are looking at growing that, continuing to address social and institutional norms, growing masculinity work. I've just shared the global research that we have recently carried out that is informing our work going forward, and advocacy work, which I've just also mentioned about how do we work in different parts of the world, and to look at what men can do in those spaces to address gender equality. So I can see that some people have been looking up what we are doing, and I'm very happy to hear that, and I'm happy to respond to any question that provides further clarity.
Yes, I'm loving this. I'm really enjoying this interaction. This is exactly what I was hoping that would happen, that the engagement at such a high level. So thank you for all those that are posting questions. And we still have more questions for you, Mr. Wageni. So a question here, when we talk about gender-based violence, we talk about women and how men can help in reducing gender-based violence towards them. However, men also face gender-based violence. So how can women help to reduce gender-based violence among men?
Okay, the first thing is also to recognizing that in terms of socialization, and when you talk about patriarchy, the dominance of men over women, is that women are also part of it. So women and girls are not actually innocent that they don't participate in it, because they have been socialized into learning that all, in most cases, that leadership is for men, that that men should not express their emotions and all that. But it's important for them also, how women can participate in ensuring that men also don't suffer violence, is to actually take an active role whenever they see that happening, to raise a voice. I talked about interrupting the interrupter, when they see a situation that leads to violence, and also noting that violence, gender-based violence, it's just not just the physical. Violence can be interpreted in many other ways, including economic. So it's also about women taking an active role, and that's why we talk about, if we have to address issues of gender inequality, we need everybody. We need men and women and people of all genders to come together. And it's also about women making the conversations easier for men who might be suffering from gender-based violence. So basically, it's everything that we are asking men to do, for women to do it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's true. Women, there are women that are violent against men. So men are victims as well. So it's I guess it's the same coin that, whatever applies to the women does apply to the men. And I appreciate you answering that question, Mr. Again. Still more questions are available for you. Mm-hmm. How can he for she and she for he message be conveyed together when addressing gender equality?
How can he for she and she for he be conveyed together?
Yes, when addressing gender equality.
Okay, I think one thing that is maybe implicit in that question is also some of the criticisms that we have faced, that he for she is very binary. It's kind of talking about he and she. We know the world is not like that, but also kind of being paternalistic in the sense that it kind of suggests that it's about men holding women's hand and helping them. So we understand all those discussions, and but I think what that is about is the whole thing about allyship, and recognizing that even though the majority of power is held by men, I give the example of heads of state, heads of global CEOs, and it's also then recognizing that there are women as well who have been very successful in their own fields, and that how then can we work with them to inspire other women, so that the voice is not just coming from men, it's also coming from women. So it's about the allyship that needs to happen, and we have been increasingly looking at that, whereby we are bringing on board some of the women who have been successful in different areas and inspiring women and girls. So I'm not sure I have answered the question to the point that it was expected, but that is what we are doing in terms of allyship.
Thank you for that. Now, I think for the benefit of our listeners as well, maybe if you could just explain what's the difference between gender equality, gender equality, and women empowerment. How are those different, or how do those work together when we talk about gender equality?
Well, that's a conceptual question, and having worked with different organizations in my life, they are applied differently. Gender equality, to me, as I understand it, is the outcome. That is the result that we want to see. Gender equity is the strategies that you use and apply to work towards gender equality. There could be different definitions, but for me, that's how I see it. Women empowerment, that term has become increasingly controversial, because it kind of suggests that there are people who are coming with all the knowledge, and they have to go to help those people who are just sitting and they don't understand much and all that. So there are questions around that. I think increasingly it's being seen as, you come with what you know, and you engage with people on what they do know around the issues that are affecting them, and based on the two experiences, you have a dialogue that then enables you to address some of the vulnerabilities that the women and girls may have. So that's how I would look at empowerment. But what is important is that the outcome of that is that people have their own agency about addressing, basically being able to address and advocate for themselves in the situations that they are in, so that people do not feel that they are powerless. Really, so that is what, to me, I would look at empowerment as such. Not one person coming over and bringing all the knowledge and all that. So for example, sometimes it might be seen that people go to different parts of the world to empower women. The people where you're going to, they understand their context much more than any other person will ever understand. So you come with what you see may have worked in other parts, and they look at that and how it can be applied in their local context. And that is exactly what we are talking about with HeForShe going forward, through advocacy, promoting hubs where conversations are happening and people coming up with locally driven solutions.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. You have taken quite a bit of questions, and we appreciate all the answers that you have given us. And thank you once again, for all the answers and your time. I hope you'll hang around. We might have more questions for you, and we'll share with them as they come. So the next speaker is, we're going to actually invite Brian Anderson to speak next. And I'll give you a short introduction to Mr. Anderson. Brian is the co-founder and executive director of Fathering Together. Brian is a husband, father of 2 spirited daughters. He started Fathering Together to be a space for fathers to connect and build supportive communities. Prior to Fathering Together, Brian has been a social worker, university chaplain, and interfaith leadership consultant, and brings those experiences in his leadership. Fathering Together sees an equitable world where fathers are actively engaged in the lives of their children. Fathering Together challenges their members to deconstruct gender norms, build strong emotional bonds, and change the narrative of who fathers are and what they can do, what they can contribute to making themselves, their families, and their communities stronger. Fathering Together defines a father to be anyone who sees themselves as a father figure. This can include, but not limited to, biological, adoptive, by marriage, grandparents, uncles, and other siblings, as well as cisgendered, non-binary, and those on the LGBTQIA+ spectrum. They invite all individuals to contribute to the community and resources. So welcome, Mr. Anderson.
Hello, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Fatima, and for putting this panel together. Very much a joy to be a part of this. And for all the dads in my network, this is something that we talk about a lot. And how do we as men step up to be the leaders for our families and co-lead with our partners? So as you so kindly shared, I've had quite an extensive career, here and there and everywhere. But the work around gender-based violence really began for me about 15 years ago when I was in graduate school and looking at men against violence programs and working with college-aged men to do the work of understanding who they were and what masculinity means, and also the violence that comes in some forms of masculinity, and especially within collegiate spaces. But it was all very theoretical. It was, I would do work with college students, we'd do campaigns and things. But then about 8 years ago, my daughter was born, and here I was holding my firstborn child, and all of this theory, all of this education came flooding back into the reality of this little baby girl that I was holding. And while I thought about gender-based violence, it didn't really sink into the depth of what I do now until I was holding my daughter, and doubly so when my second daughter was born a couple years later. And this idea of allyship through my role as father kind of started to percolate and grow. And so with Fathering Together, while at the core of our work, it's creating these communities of virtual communities, I should say, kind of like virtual barbershops, as Edward was mentioning with the HeForShe movement. It was imperative to me that we infuse this not just with resources to being good fathers, but also resources to make the world more equitable. How are we being an ally and advocating for change around issues of gender equity, around issues of racial equity, and everything in between? Because if we weren't able to make a shift for a better world for our children, then what were we really ultimately doing as fathers? And so at the core of our work is the community, and then the resources that we pour into it to make everyone's lives just a little bit better. And I totally attest to what you were saying, Edward, in terms of when you get men together, they're starved to share their journey and their story. And so how do we create those spaces to learn from one another and to not feel like we're lost or kind of on our own, this kind of lone wolf idea that men need to be able to accomplish everything by themselves, but instead to dive in and share our journeys with one another. And so that's a bit about what we do at Fathering Together. We became an organization about a month before everything shut down with the pandemic. And so what we had planned to do was create local communities, start to engage men on the ground level, and connect them with resources in their towns and communities. And then, everything kind of shifted to virtual. And so we've been doing a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of Zoom community building. And now we're starting to leverage this virtual community we've built. We've got about 125,000, 130,000 dads worldwide, about 7,000 to 8,000 Canadian dads in our network specifically that we work with. And so we're identifying leaders in our Facebook communities, our newsletter, whatnot, to help bring this virtual space into local communities. And currently, we've got a group in Kenya. We've got about 150 dads that have been meeting on and off for the last several months in Kenya with a local leader there who's doing phenomenal work, Malawi as well, and then places throughout the US and Canada. So when I got the invitation to speak, I was just thrilled to share this. But my remarks, I want to kind of take a slight different angle, because I agree with everything Edward was saying, but for me, with the work we're doing with fathers is looking at how does gender equality start in the home, and what are the steps that fathers can take to initiate that change in their home. And so I'm having an issue with my laptop, so I'm just going to talk. Unfortunately, my slides are not working, but that's okay. We'll just go with it anyway. But for me, it's very simple, and we just heard a very great definition that equality is a goal, right? That's our North Star that we're aiming for. And equity, gender equity specifically, is the systems and the processes that we put in place for all of us to engage. So, great. Thank you, Jennifer. If you're able to share the slides on my behalf, that would be lovely, but it's okay if not. So there's really 4 steps that I want to focus on for what we can do at home. So if you could go a couple slides in, that would be great. Sorry for the technical glitch on my end. So go a couple more slides, please. Great. We can just leave this slide up for this part of the talk. That would be lovely. So at a very baseline level, when we talk about gender equality, there's a practical step of how are we sharing the household chores? How are we sharing what goes into our childcare, and who is showing up? Research ahead of COVID, at least in the United States and Canada, a lot of men were stepping up to being the stay-at-home parent while their partners were going off and working full-time. And we saw that really reversed in the pandemic, but that doesn't mean that fathers aren't able to still step up and take on some of those responsibilities, like doing the dishes or making sure, the grass is mowed in your yard, or the toys are picked up outside, and really getting the children involved as best you can to share in the work of the home. But the piece that gets spelled out by an author here in the United States called Ephraim, she wrote a book called Fair Play, and she talked about it's very easy to look at the execution of chores and the execution of equity, but we don't always look at the emotional labor and the the buildup and kind of the thought that goes into how we need to navigate this in our homes. And so we've been doing a lot of work with her and working with fathers to recognize the emotional labor and the quote unquote management of a home rather than just the execution of chores. And when I talk with fathers, and I did a workshop a couple of weeks ago, many of them, like a light bulb flipped in their heads, because for many of us, it's okay, we take the kids to school, we take them to their sporting events, but we don't always do that extra step of how do we make sure that the food is ready? How do we make sure that the clothes are ready or the uniform is clean and ready to go for the soccer match or football, what have you? And so when we look at the chores and childcare, there's a whole system in place that fathers can step in and ultimately role model allyship around gender equity by taking on those functions and those roles. And the funny thing is, many of us as fathers do that in the workplace. Many of us are team leaders, many of us are project managers, and we work backwards from events to say, okay, we have this product coming out or this event, a panel like this one on this specific date. Working backwards, we need to have these things in place ahead of time. But we don't always do that in the home, right? So many of those duties and expectations fall on the default parent, quote unquote, of mom. And for many dads that I work with, they're single parents or they're in a situation where they don't live with the mother or the co-parent. And so a lot of those chores get brought back into their life. And so helping them navigate the gender equality through very tactile steps and stages that go day in and day out in our home. The other piece of this is how are fathers recognizing their family in the work they do and the choices they make. So much of our work now is online, it's all virtual. Social media never sleeps, right? It's not a 9-to-5 job. And for many of us, we were raised in a 9-to-5 world back in the 80s, 90s, and before. And now our children are being raised in a world where there's always something to be seen, always something to be engaged in, to take our time. And so how do we as fathers recognize our duty to our family when making those decisions in the workplace, in our careers, in the obligations that we take on, the responsibilities that we choose, so that we can be stepping up and making sure that our children have their needs met before we're stepping out further beyond the means we may be able to take. And that ultimately comes in the role modeling that we do. We have a dad in our leadership team who shared with us that he got into a fight with his partner the other day. And halfway through the fight, he caught himself because he realized he was being very rude and speaking very unkindly to his partner, and his daughter and his son were watching his discussion and his heated words. And he realized the way that he was speaking was setting an example for his daughter and his son for what a father looks like. And he didn't want his children to see the violence in his words and in his actions to set a standard for what is okay in their partnership. And in research articles coming out in sociology magazines and parenting workshops, we see the impact of fathers on children's lives, especially daughters' lives. They set a standard for what a husband should be. They create opportunities for better healthy body image, better academics in school, better mental health around anxiety and depression. And so the more a father can have an impactful moment on their children, the more that role modeling is going to have ripples in the generations ahead. And that comes then to my final point of being emotionally courageous. If you could go 2 slides, Jennifer, that would be great. Emotional courage for me and for what we do in our work is moving away from the guy on top being exhausted while our kids are still awake and needing us, to the dad on the bottom where they're engaged and talking with their children, having the tea parties, building imaginative worlds with bricks and Legos and you name it. And there's 3 steps that I talk with fathers about, and that's on the next slide, Jennifer, thank you. And that is being emotionally aware, then being emotionally expressive, and finally building those emotional connections. So many people in the United States that are fathers that I talk to, same goes true in most Western cultures where I've engaged with men, we're allowed to be happy, glad, mad, or sad, right? We've got 3 baseline emotions that we're allowed. And if that's all we have, it's very hard for us to role model a diversity of other emotions, to express those other emotions. I've talked with dads that they don't really understand the difference between being angry, being frustrated, being really hostile, right? It all comes down to, well, I'm just mad. Same goes true if they're happy. Are they joyful? Are they just plain happy? Are they elated because of something that's happened? Or is there an element of pride that they can be having in their children? If they're not able to name those emotions, how are they able to then help inform the language that their children have in understanding the emotions that they're going through, especially in those youngest of years when those emotions are starting to really form and take hold? And so I really impress upon fathers in our work to be expressive, to allow yourself to cry, to allow yourself to show that vulnerability that comes with not knowing every answer, not knowing how to navigate every crisis that comes, but to be expressive and communicative in the way that you address that with your children so they can learn and navigate how to grow emotionally with them, with the father. But it also comes with not reacting to tantrums with your own tantrum. And I'll definitely admit that I have my own fair share of tantrums. I'm not a perfect father, nor am I a perfect person. So there have been many moments when my children have meltdowns and I'm at my wit's end and I'm emotionally exhausted and I react rather than respond. I allow myself to play into the fight that my child wants, the attention my child wants, with my deflated self rather than responding in a healthy and emotionally developmental way. And when that happens, nothing good really comes of it. But when I allow myself to take a deep breath and engage and build an emotional connection, remembering that A, I wanted to be a father, and B, I can't just fire my child, right? You can't just disown your child the way that you can step away from the workplace or look for a new job. These children are yours. They're there to learn and grow with you. And so building that emotional connection, understanding that they need to hear from you the best way to grow and the best way to understand how to navigate a challenging situation is all the time going to be looking to you and your partner or the other parent in the situation to navigate that. And so the larger work that needs to be done in the workplaces, in the corporate spaces, in our academic spaces, all of that is essential. I totally agree with everything that's been shared on this panel already. I was nodding vigorously along with everything being shared. But if we aren't also doing that work in the home, if we're not finding ways to be emotionally expressive to our children, to role model what it's like to be in a partnership, in a family unit, then we're not actively going to be successful in changing these other systems. And for me, that started with my child's birth. And every day I get a new challenge from her, and well, both of them, because they're learning things so much more than I can catch up with. And if I want the world to be better and stronger and ready for their energy and ready for your children's energy, then we have to do our role as fathers to start changing those systems now and doing a lot of the work that the HeForShe Alliance is doing. And regardless of the culture we're in, translating and navigating that so that children come up in a world where they have opportunities to thrive. And so, again, I really appreciate being invited onto this panel. Looking forward to hearing more from others as this day goes on, but appreciate the chance to share a little bit about what we do at Fathering Together and the home work that we do with dads. And so feel free to reach out if you have questions or if you are interested in having a Fathering Together chapter in your local community. We're going to be launching those in January, February of next year, where we've got a training curriculum that we go with our that we develop with our chapter leaders to do monthly meetups, whether that's with dads just talking to other dads, like in a barber shop, at a coffee shop, church basement, wherever is helpful. But then quarterly, what are we doing to give back? Here in the United States, Thanksgiving is just around the corner, and we're going to be doing what we call quote unquote dad's giving. We're inviting our members in our communities to step up and go out and do acts of charity, getting canned foods for the soup kitchen or cleaning up the park or any number of activities, and bringing their children with them to start building a sense of commitment to their community so that as fathers, again, we're role modeling what an equitable world looks like and putting ourselves in the place that we want our children to step into. So thank you again. Feel free to ask any questions or reach out afterwards as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it, Brian. And yeah, you're right. It's so important. It starts with the family, right? That's family, then it goes into the community, then it goes into the nation, and it's worldwide. But the family unit is really important, and being the role model and being conscious of how we raise our children as well. I have 2 boys and no girls. So I make an effort that they have to take part in cleaning the house and in cooking as well, because, you know, I don't want them to grow up with the mentality that cooking is only for women. So mom's the only one who's been cooking. So sometimes I'm like, okay, so what are you cooking? They're like, me? Yeah, you. So, and yeah. So it's important that we start nurturing our kids into the people that they can be, where all these things that we are saying, we need to change the narrative, and it starts with the family. It starts with us doing it ourselves. So let me see if we have a question. We have one. The structures we raise children in are going to be how they navigate the workplace and romance and these other spaces. How have you found being a father has informed your methods in rallying men towards gender equity?
Yeah, I think, as I said in the beginning, I was very involved in different work around gender-based violence before becoming a father, but it didn't really hit home in the same way until I held my daughter and said, okay, this is someone that I want to have the world open to her, right? But statistically speaking, I know there's a lot of chances of sexual violence for my daughter. And, you know, the first iteration of Fathering Together, my friends and I started, was a Dads with Daughters group. And when we started to grow and expand what we wanted to achieve, we didn't want this to be only for dads with daughters. We wanted this to be dads of any child, because like yourself with sons, there's education and lessons that sons can learn on certain levels of like making their own dinner, ironing their own shirts, that I had to learn because I wasn't married right away. I had plenty of years when I was on my own. But also, what are we doing to help turn the conversation away from boys looking at girls as a sexual conquest, or boys looking at girls as property for them to achieve and go and claim. And as fathers, what we do is break that down in simple terms and really make it personable, because that's ultimately what's going to get someone to change. The data is great. The research is wonderful. We have to do that research to look at trends and how to address mass movement. But if you don't translate that back to how do I as an individual relate to you as a human being, and how do we get our children to relate to one another as human beings, then all the data in the world is not going to necessarily help us in that moment. And so it's translating that data into real life stories and helping people recognize their role as a father. One thing that used to come out quite often when dads would join the group is they would say, hey, I'm a dad with 3, 4 daughters, you name the number. I'm going to have to go out and buy a gun, or I'm going to go out and like get really strong so I can protect them and prevent harm from coming to my daughters. And there's an implicit violence towards another person in those statements, right? There's a violence towards another dad's child who might be trying to come after his children. And so we would work with them and talk with them to say, like, there's another way to look about this. Like, there's a way that we can empower our daughters to protect themselves and to make good choices, and to empower our sons, as I said earlier, not to look at other women as property. And so as fathers, how we talk about that, how we role model it, how we watch media and consume media and say, like, an offhand comment of look at that beautiful woman could be interpreted as misogyny or ownership of that woman's body. And so it comes at the basic level of education and language that we use in our homes to help fathers teach their children how to navigate that effectively.
Wonderful. I can totally relate to what you just said about the father with the daughters. I have 4 sisters. We have no brother. So thankfully, that's not the route my dad took to protect us, but protect us he did with wisdom, and even just giving us a chance as well to be to be ourselves and giving us the opportunity to protect ourselves as well. So that's really important. Like four girls is not easy to bring up, but he did a pretty good job, I think.
Yes.
Wonderful. So another question is, tell us why you think that an initiative like Dads of the Week does for your organization. What value do you think there is in having strong representation for fathers?
Yeah. So, we've got hundreds of thousands of dads in our network, and vast majority of them, they're not superstars, right? They're not like a rock star or a movie star. They're just dads who are working a 9-to-5 job or 2 jobs to make ends meet, to do what they can to celebrate their children. And so with this program, Dads of the Week, we started about 2 years ago, and it was our goal to elevate the stories of common dads who are just doing what they can and showcasing the simple ways that dads are stepping in to be effective leaders for their families and communicating their values, their experiences to their children. And then for those in our community who are maybe struggling with coming up with a strategy, or maybe they're facing a developmental stage of, how do I get my child to sleep through the night? How do I do potty training? Or how do I talk to my kids about dating and beyond? How can we use these stories to normalize what all fathers are going through? At the very beginning, when I held my daughter, what I didn't share was that my wife had several mom groups that she was a part of, and there were no fatherhood communities for me. And I struggled a lot in those first few weeks of my child's life, because it was in the middle of winter. It was a terrible snowstorms, and we were housebound for several weeks with my daughter. So I couldn't really talk to anyone about it, what I was going through. And I was like, is this normal? Like, am I depressed? Like, I'm really struggling here. How do I turn to someone beyond my father or my father-in-law for that guidance? And so, I found some friends, and that ultimately then became Fathering Together. But if we don't have community to normalize the experiences we're going through, to check in on one another, on both the struggles, but also the joys of celebrating birthdays or accomplishments, then we're not necessarily going to be able to navigate the tough stuff. And so that was kind of the antithesis, the predecessor of what Dads of the Week can do for all of us. Yeah.
Awesome. It's really nice. I'm really happy to hear that you have a chapter in Kenya, because that was really cool. I like that. That's good to know that you're international. It's not just here, you're international. You've got chapters all over. So that's wonderful. I do have one more question. What type of resources does your organization provide to fathers?
Sure. So most of the work that we're doing currently is around early childhood education and helping fathers understand some of the milestones that their children go through, but also how do we set a vision? How do we set goals for ourselves to be present and emotionally connected with the children in our lives? As kind of the workshops or the educational component. But the vast majority of our resources comes in setting up these virtual groups. We meet monthly or twice a month for dads to connect with other dads, talk through issues that they're facing, and whether that's on social justice issues like this, or on gender-based violence, or just like, let's go outside and go for a hike. What are some good hikes in the area? Or how can I use the outdoors as an educational classroom for my children? A lot of that comes through the conversations and the structures we set, and we'll bring in experts or specialists in different areas to talk with our dads about that, whether that's in the Facebook communities we run or in a Zoom platform like this, and whatnot. And then in the coming year, as we launch more chapters, we're going to be working with schools and setting up dad community groups within school systems, so that dads also feel more connected to the educational process and being present and helping in more formal education spaces with their children. Wonderful.
Yeah, you have to go to the core, right, from the kids, so that when they grow up, they already grow up with that already instilled in them. So with the older generation, they grew up with the father being the masculine and the fighter and all that. But then, yes, of course, there's that vulnerable part that we also have to be in touch with when we, especially with our kids, to see that, and that being their norm now. That's
Indeed.
wonderful. Yeah, so I do have actually one more question. How do you measure success with your work?
Sure, yeah. I mean, on one level, we're looking at engagement. So in our Facebook community, we've got, in our largest group, we have 127,000 dads, and half of those are engaged on any given day with making a post or commenting, engaging. And so there's on a baseline, just the numbers that we're looking at, what's our engagement, so that we can go after different organizations to bring in sponsorships or to bring in resources, because we don't want to reinvent resources that already exist. We'd much rather work with specialists and bring them into our community. So there's that level. The other level then is is a trickier piece though, but it's the qualitative stuff where we're going after dads and asking them to fill out surveys of how are they recognizing the connection in their children? Are their children coming to them with issues? Are they feeling an emotional connection with their child? And what does that look like? So that we can either highlight them as Dads of the Week or in other capacities, or build more resources to help tighten those bonds and tighten that engagement between a father and a child. And then from my board's perspective, who are the partners that we're bringing in, right? One level of our success is also being connected and engaged with larger conversations, so that we're not reinforcing stereotypes we don't want, where, fathering together knows everything because we're the men, we're the fathers, right? As you were just saying, these big, brawny, strong men. We see ourselves as servant leaders. We see ourselves as part of a larger connection. And so the number of organizations that we're partnered with and working to instill healthy fatherhood identities is critical to that as well. So those are kind of the three levels of success that we look at.
Wonderful, great. So in terms of fathering together, how do you think your organization can work with KCA? Yeah,
so if any of your members are looking to start a local chapter or get dads more involved, please let me know. We've got, as I said, we've got a lot of dads in our Facebook community that we're working with, as well as in Kenya. So happy to help work with you in your community, whether that's at your sports club or a church or just a neighborhood rec center. Happy to work with you and give you some strategies around that. So feel free to reach out for that. If you're looking to do a fundraiser and need dads to show up and help, we can help drum up volunteers and, help in that way as well. I think for us, we're very much a preventative approach. And so how can we prevent some of these issues down the road instead of finding Band-Aids, and getting fathers to be healthier and more holistic in their understanding of themselves, so that they can be proactive in engaging these issues. And so using our numbers to help create change, but then also doing the fundraising and supporting of dads who may be in need of a little bit more education and not having the funding to do it. There's plenty of dads campaigns and coaches out there where you have to be, pay $25 a month, $30 a month to be a member. And so many of our members don't have that kind of income, especially members in Africa, like our dads in Malawi. We sent out a message and they were like, that's 3 months of my salary. I'm not going to be able to afford that. And I was like, sorry, you should not have gotten that email. That is on us to raise that funds to help you. But your story is important to us. So how do we navigate that together? And so again, helping us fundraise, helping us do the work on the ground level with dads are all ways to engage.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, wonderful. That's great. Thanks for answering all those questions. And let me check if there's any more questions. Don't think we have any. Do we have any comment from any one of the panelists here? Mr. Wageni, Ephraim?
Yes, Brian, I just want to say thank you very much. Your work is very inspiring, and we would really like to see how we can work together moving forward. We want to have more fathers and dads inspire the young people as mentors. And also if there are projects we can carry on together here in Canada. So we really appreciate to work together and collaborate moving forward. Thank you very much.
The honor is all mine. Thank you. Yes, very much so.
Thank you. And once again, thanks from me for being here and engaging with us. And you gave us a really good presentation. So appreciate that. Okay, so what I'm going to do next, I will introduce the video for Jake. Just give me 1 second. Let me introduce him. He's the one, Jake Starkey. Sorry, Jake, give me 1 second. Jake Sticker, my apologies. He's sent us a video because he was looking forward to join us, but however, was not able to. So I'll give you a quick bio and then we'll start off the video. Jake is the executive director of Next Gen Men. Next Gen is an organization, Next Gen Men is an organization working to engage men and boys in schools, workplaces, and communities to further their understanding of gender inequity and invite them as allies in the pursuit of gender equality. Jake is a passionate speaker and facilitator focused on gender-based issues related to the social emotional development of young men and the health and well-being of men in communities and gender equity in workplaces. He was named one of Avenues magazine's top 40 under 40. He earned recognition from Ashoka, the British Council, and the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion. He has spoken at the United Nations as part of the Canadian delegation, participated in the UN Women Safe Cities Initiative Global Forum, and also a proud advisor of the Calgary Immigrant Women's Association, Canadian Women and Sport, as well as the Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter. If you would please have his video play so that we can hear what he has to share with us today. Jennifer? Jennifer, I hope we have not got a glitch here. Just give me 1 second.
Probably Lawrence or
Lawrence?
Or Danish, whoever had that.
Oh, there it's coming. Awesome, thank you.
Hey folks, Jake Sticker, co-founder and executive director of an organization called Next Gen Men, working towards a future where boys and men feel less pain and cause less harm. So sorry I'm not able to join you all live today. As you see me standing here, moving side to side, I've been dealing with a bit of a back injury, so I'm going to take it easy on Saturday, but I wanted to take part in this important conversation about gender equality and the UN's HeForShe program. And I'm so grateful for the Association of Kenyan Canadians for inviting me to share a little bit about my work and my story. First of all, Next Gen Men, like I said, working towards a future where boys and men feel less pain and cause less harm. And the way that we're doing that is by engaging, educating, and empowering boys and men around gender and equality. And to share with you a little bit of the origin story of that work, I myself am a tall white male, and I was playing basketball and, played on a semi-professional varsity level. And despite all that going really well in my life, I had experiences with mental health issues, specifically depression. And a lot of that was this masculine narrative that I'd inherited around, you've got to be tough, you can't show emotion, you can't ask for help. And realizing that it was not anything external that someone was telling me, but rather my own internal programming and how I'd been socialized to be a man in the world that was harming me. I went on a healing journey, and simultaneously, one of my best friends from university, who's my co-founder, unfortunately lost his 13-year-old brother to suicide in 2007. A young Black male, we think he was in the closet and he was experiencing homophobic bullying, and it was a tragic loss to us in our community. So between those two experiences, my struggles with mental health, my best friend's loss of his younger brother, we wanted something different for the next generation of men. So the catalyst for us into caring about gender-based issues was through men's experiences. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as we have this conversation about gender equality and the HeForShe platform is as much as this conversation is about advancing women and girls and the historical and current inequities that they experience, as well as the experiences of trans and non-binary individuals, men and boys have an important stake in this conversation as well. One thing that I think is important to note is we do not want to participate in benevolent sexism. And what I mean by that is when we talk about male allyship, we cannot be talking about how women should be protected and put on a pedestal and those kinds of things without actually talking about the power structures at play as to why women experience the things that they do. And those power structures at play out amongst us, boys and men as well too, right? We are socialized in a culture of competition and domination from a very young age. We see 2, 3-year-old boys holding hands, hugging, but by the time they're 4 or 5, you don't see them as intimate as they used to be. And that's amongst themselves and also with men in their lives, whether that be fathers or other male family figures. There's a real distancing that happens at that age. Yet we still need intimate touch and caring for one another. And so the way the boys start to seek those types of things is through roughhousing and play fighting. And that's often the birth of a conversation around boys will be boys, because that's how we give them permission to be the way they are, which often breeds them into very highly energetic, output-oriented individuals, which is often at conflict with education-based systems where you have to sit and pay attention, and oftentimes girls get more socialization about being prim and proper and behaving in certain ways in certain situations. And so the boys really stand out and they struggle with their early education, and oftentimes they're overdiagnosed or misdiagnosed in and around having attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity, and work towards mitigating those things and inherit this idea of maybe I'm broken, maybe I'm not working, when it's often a system or a setting that doesn't necessarily meet their needs in and around that. And that can make someone emotional, and perhaps they tear up and cry about it. And then someone says, well, boys don't cry, right? And so they learn that emoting that way is not a good way to emote. And then, we introduce them to the world of sports from a very young age. And when I talk about a culture of competition and domination, welcome to a world of competition. And oftentimes their first role models, male role models, because early childhood education often has so many female role models, are their sports coaches. And perhaps they stub their toe or they feel upset about how a game goes, but a coach says to them, man up. This is how the world is. You need to man up and get through this. So that's another message that they absorb. And then at some point, as young teenage men, they internalize this experience of, well, what it means to be a man is to lose your virginity. So all of the relations across sexes come from that mindset. And you know what? Maybe they find a young woman who's willing to entertain the idea of a relationship with them, but yet they haven't had the schooling around healthy relationships. And they get to a point where maybe there's a bit of discomfort and someone says, no, please don't stop. I don't want to. But their whole life, when they've wanted to be touched and felt, when they've wanted to emote, when they've said what is bothering them, the world told them, no, don't stop, right? The world doesn't have time for those types of emotions and feelings. And so, unfortunately, we see many young men cross lines and boundaries into a world that they don't necessarily want to or believe in participating. And now, this is a bit of a fantastical or a sensationalized story. Not every young man will experience that exact same journey, but I hope that in telling that story, you can see or imagine a man in your life, a boy in your life, someone that you know within certain aspects of that. And that's why when we talk about a future where boys and men experience less pain and cause less harm, we're leading with empathy and following with accountability, right? This patriarchal system and structure that we all work and live within and socialize within and those kinds of things, it harms women and girls. But men are 3 out of 4 suicides. Men die on average 5 years earlier than women due to increased risk-taking and decreased health-seeking and help-seeking behaviors. Men have increased rates of incarceration, substance abuse, homelessness. Men are the primary victims of all forms of violence, and aside from gender-based violence, they're actually the #1 victims of all other forms of violence as well too. So those are the extreme stakes of how patriarchy harms men and boys. But the author Bell Hooks writes in the book Will to Change, the first act of violence that patriarchy asks of boys and men is not that against women, but that against themselves. And should they fail to psychologically and emotionally cripple themselves, they'll be met by a group of men who will do it for them, which really underpins a lot of the work and the approach that we're trying at Next Gen Men. So to tell you a little bit more specifically about that, we've been running youth programs, pre-COVID, classically after school, since 2014. We're about to turn 7 years old, which is really exciting and also just mind-boggling. Aside from waking up and breathing every day, it's the longest thing that I've committed myself to in my personal life. So go me. With those after-school programs, we predominantly work with 12 to 14-year-old boys. And the reason we chose that age group is that, like I said earlier, boys and young men are often socialized around the type of power and status and stature and whatnot in communities that they'll have by media and by, even just looking out in the world of who is still in positions of power. When you're a 12-year-old boy, you look around and you say, I don't have any power. My teacher tells me what to do. My mom tells me what to do. My coach tells me what to do. So the ways they start practicing that power is in their friend group, their community, by differentiation of race, sexuality, gender. And so that's why we see those spikes in homophobia, racism, misogyny. And so it's important for them to have positive role models, to role model healthy masculinities, positive masculinities as we call them. That work has since evolved in a bunch of different ways. We now create tools. We've got cards for masculinity, boys will be, for folks who want to spark conversations with young men in their lives around what's going on for them. Oftentimes it can feel very overwhelming. I'm not trained. I don't know how to have this conversation, but pulling a card from a deck, it makes it a really safe and easy way to start a conversation with a young person that you care about in your life. Additionally, we provide training through a course called Raising Next Gen Men that's available online, and we're working to empower teachers, coaches, youth workers with our programming. So that's our youth work. Then we learned we need community. We need people who care about our work and who want to rally around us. And we saw that a lot of women were talking about men, and there was some men's groups talking with men, but there was very few spaces in community where people of all genders came together and talked for, with, and about men. And so in 2016, we started an initiative called NGM Circle, which pre-pandemic was happening in 5 cities across Canada. Now our events are online. The next event is, I believe, November 15th on masculinity in the mountains. And, we create spaces for those conversations. And we've also now created a private forum, and we'd love to meet you at one of our community events. And lastly, what we've also done is create a workplace initiative called Equity Leaders, where we work in male-dominant industries, tech, finance, construction, resource extraction, to work with leaders in those industries to better understand how gender equity and broader diversity and inclusion initiatives are beneficial to men and to people of the dominant narrative, whether it be a return on involvement around parental leave and flexible work practices, whether it be a culture of inclusion, which includes psychological safety and belonging, whether it be mental health, right, for men and women, whether it be fixing the leaky talent pipeline, the future of work, resilience and innovation. Those are the types of conversations we're having with those workplaces and helping them move forward towards that equitable future. And so to wrap all that in a neat bow, Next Gen Men is working towards a future where boys and men feel less pain and cause less harm. And the way that we're doing that is by engaging, educating, and empowering boys and men around gender equality among youth in communities and workplaces. Again, I'm sorry that I'm not able to be with you live today. I really love Q&A. I much prefer talking with people than at people. If there's any questions that you have about Next Gen Men, I'd love to hear them. You can email us at info@nextgenmen.ca. You can follow us on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at NextGenMen. And most of all, I invite you to sign up for our newsletter at futureofmasculinity.com. And just always send us a note, send us a question. We love doing this work. We'd love to know how you do this work. And I thank you for the time and the space, the Kenyan Canadian Association, for the conversation around gender equality and what men can do to support women, often by taking care of their own business. And I look forward to seeing you in the interwebs some other way soon. Take good care. Have a tremendous weekend. Ciao.
That was a great presentation. I wish he was live. I'm sure there would be lots more questions for him. Brian, I'm thinking, listening to what he's saying, it goes very much in line with what your organization, Fathering Together, is doing. Any thoughts about that, about what Jake has just shared with us?
Lots of thoughts, lots of, I mean, in many ways, that took me back 15 years when I first started doing this work, and seeing young men, especially college age, trying to understand and navigate who they are as individuals. And you know, where I come from in the United States, a lot of what masculinity and boys represent are a negation of what is not masculinity or not manly. And to that end, it leaves us with very little other than anger and aggression. You can cry a little bit at a sports game, but you can't, or maybe when your child is born or someone dies, but you know, we're left with a lot. There's a very restrictive, what we call a man box, right? And inside that box are a lot of contradictory topics, but outside of that is a lot of words that we associate with women, minorities, people of color, you know, LGBTQIA individuals, where you don't want to be associated, quote unquote, with that, because that's not manhood or manly. And so to be able to do what they're doing in small groups and in discussions to reframe what masculinity is. And the cards, I learned about those cards a while ago, and I'm trying to figure out what we can have for fatherhood cards to complement that, because it's a great way. There's a guy in California who does a lot of work with the masks that we wear as men, and uses cards and games as well to help boys better express themselves and better express all of these emotions that they haven't yet done. And so I commend him and Next Gen Men for the work they're doing, and definitely want to collaborate in the future and figure out ways that we can kind of help men become fathers who are engaged and healthy too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I while I'm listening to him, I was thinking about your organization, and like this would be perfect, because now you can definitely collaborate, because you kind of have the same, you're doing the same thing. You're working with the fathers and he's working with the boys. So again, changing that narrative from when they're young is so important. And yeah, I think it's a good opportunity that you'd be able to work with Next Gen Men at some point in the future. It's is there a way, or do you know of any such knowledge or practices, or where schools we can put this in schools? I'm thinking it sounds like something really that needs to be engraved in our education. Yeah. So that the kids grow up, just like the way we say kids in our schools are not taught how to deal with money. This is I think an important topic where kids have to be taught on such important issues as well.
Yes, and there are, here in the United States, there are school systems that are starting to implement what we call social emotional learning, and it's really life coping skills. My children are in a class, kindergartners learn self-talk and how to have a quiet space in their room where they can go. I remember the first time my kindergartner came home and she was like, "I'm very upset. I need to go sit in my room." And she wasn't in trouble. Nothing happened, right? But she knew that she was just not her best self. And my wife and I kind of looked at each other and said, okay, what does this mean? And she had put a little chair in her closet and was drawing and just doing some art as a way to kind of calming herself down. And then she came out and she's like, okay, I'm ready to be part of the family again. And I was like, who is this, right? So there are organizations like Next Gen Men that are looking at, again, the emotional intelligence work and how do we break down coping and health mechanisms for our children. There's a couple that are in the United States that I've worked with as well. There's one called A Call to Men that works with a lot of high school aged boys. And they just started a new program to kind of offset the girl dad phenomenon that's been going on with a boy mom. And so working with moms of boys to get them to be more emotionally expressive and understanding that it's okay to have all of these emotions and still be a man. And then there's a couple other organizations that do it from more of a race-based approach, incorporating emotional intelligence at the intersection of race relations. And now that I've said that, I've totally lost the name of the group I was going to mention, but I'm happy to send an email with some resources after the fact once I get my head back online, so to speak. Yeah, but there are ways. Plenty of organizations are looking at this and are implementing school-based strategies, even as young as preschool, and getting kids to just being able to talk it out rather than bottling it up and exploding.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That is so important. That is so important. I remember my one of my family members had a little boy who loved to play with the dolls. He had two sisters and he was the youngest. And she was like, no, go play with Spider-Man. Again, this is the programming that we are responsible. We are not even aware, I think, that we're doing it because it's been that way. That has been the narrative for a long time. Yeah. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Unfortunately, we seem like we are having issues connecting with our mayor, Mayor Brown, who's really looking forward to joining us, and he had some. He wanted to share some few words with us. Unfortunately, that seems to be having connectivity issues. So let us, everything that we've talked about is the resources are going to be on our KCA website. I'm afraid we're going to have to, we've reached at the end of our conversation here. Again, we might have to bring Mayor Brown at another point in time so that we could hear what he has to say in this very, very important conversation. Again, I'd like to thank all our panelists, Mr. Wageni, Mr. Anderson, as well as Mr. Sticker, for taking the time to spend some time with us this afternoon and having these wonderful and very, very important conversations. Having said that, I believe we have reached the end, and thanks again to you, the participants. You've been with us all this time, listening in, tuning in on Zoom, on YouTube, as well as Facebook Live. Thanks for the questions that you asked and the engagement that you have involved yourselves in. Thank you so much, and wish everybody a wonderful rest of Saturday and Sunday.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.